Here you go.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to put it to speaker view, which not sure. Kim, is that good for me? Can you see me? Cool. All right. Hey everyone. So as Cam was saying, as you are coming on live, Cam or I will be admitting you into the live Zoom room. And if you're watching live in the Facebook group, just let us know if you're having any issues. And Avery, our amazing, just Wonder Woman over here, will be able to help you as well. So I want to jump right in because as Cam said, like we do have an hour and a half blocked off, but I want to give as much time as humanly possible for the Q&A section. So I can actually jump in and really answer your questions. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen and then let me know, can everyone see everything? Okay, cool. All right, so as you all are pretty well aware at this point, but just in case you're not, we're going to be going over how my story, but also a huge part of how I was able to reverse the effects of my own chronic pain and my own battle with severe, like panic-inducing anxiety and chronic fatigue. So I'm just going to like kind of jump right in with this. And as I am going through this, I will have some opportunity for you guys to jump in the chat, and Kim will be monitoring that as well. So, and then just know that there will also be a question section at the end. So first things first, why is this actually important? Not just to me, for you guys as well. And for a lot of you, if you've ever suffered from chronic pain and health issues as an entrepreneur, like this is for you. And you also know how freaking devastating it can be to your impact and what you want to create. I, of all people, completely understand that, as I used to experience such insane, tremendous pain. And as the subtitle suggested, like I was completely dependent on narcotic pain medications every day. And when I couldn't do that, I was smoking weed all day long. So when I say tremendous pain, those that understand chronic pain know that when doctors would ask you, hey, what is your pain levels? And I would be like, oh, the normal amount. And then the doctor would be like, but the normal amount is 0. And I was like, no. So that was my experience for a long time. And it, for me, my story that I brought into it is it really kept me from doing a lot of the things that I know and love. And I kind of brought that into my life. And so through this journey that I'm about to kind of dive into right now, I was able to heal a lot of that. And I wanted to not just help myself heal, but also help you guys unlock your potential for healing. So with that being said, some topics that we are going to be covering is, well, obviously my story. We're going to first go into stage 1, which is more of the physical side. Then stage 2 will be finding the actual root problem. And then stage 3 is what I was just hinting about, which is unlocking those healing opportunities for growth. And like Abby said, yeah, 6 was the normal pain. Totally get it. So speaking of pain, this picture was taken at kind of probably one of the scariest times of my life. I'm just looking at that picture. I already can feel it. So this was in 2015. I was told that if I didn't stop everything I loved, that I would be bedridden. My back looked like a 50-year-old. And every time I was doing all these different procedures and tests, the nurses would always come in and be so shocked that I was so young, because my imaging did not look like a young person. At this time, I was 20. So this is 7 years ago, for those that want to do math. So, but it didn't just start here. My story got started from a very young age. where I was always known as the sick kid. Always was running to the bathroom after dinner, throwing up, where to the point where there constantly was checked by psychiatrists to see if I had bulimia or anything like that, because of the fact that I had like this mystery illness. So I was always known as the sick kid. And at age 14, I was diagnosed with depression, chronic insomnia, and a few other things. And their solution was to give me a bunch of, medications. Again, it's the normal way, right? And at age 14, basically my only solution was to be on drugs for the rest of my life and eventually get to the point where, since I was so young, that eventually those medications would no longer work. So as me looking at it, and I knew that this wasn't the problem, I refused. And because of that, they basically sent me on my way. Fast forward to the car accident of this picture that you see today. It took me from managing the sick girl, managing myself and my symptoms, and just trying to get through and live my life to its fullest, to absolutely, completely bedridden. But even still, I would still force myself to get up and do things. And I was back into college less than 3 months later, because I refused all diagnoses. And I was like, no, that's not happening. And so my journey continued of progressively getting worse as, surprise, surprise, my stubborn self refused to let any diagnosis control me or define who I was. And so I continuously just managed what I could. I was in sports medicine, so I applied everything that I knew in the medical field to my own self. And I felt like I was always the case study. I mean, literally teachers would actually literally use me and my x-rays and different things as case studies. And so I got a lot of free medical advice. And then through the entire time, it was very much this hyper focus on the physical. And then it started a journey of feeling really helpless and feeling like nothing could ever remotely compare. I felt very alone. And as you can imagine, feeling alone, everyone was like, oh, you need to go to therapy. You need to go back to therapy. All the stuff that you're doing, feeling all alone, depressed, all this stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try therapy. And so I have, it's been 11 years of therapy and different therapeutic modalities on that side. And I'll dive more into both of those stories as well, as they definitely relate to some of the things that I found. But just know that this story of my experiences, where my entire identity was wrapped up in what I could or could not do. And through that, I discovered that a lot of the identities that we don't say about ourselves or that we do say about ourselves really control us. So I'm going to dive more into that, but I just wanted to double check, because I know there's a lot of people that are said they wanted to come in. I want to give them an opportunity. So I want to check in and make sure that everyone is ready, because this isn't just me talking about my story. This is going to be some actual, real, tangible things that you can walk with today. So Avery and Cam are going to be monitoring the various chats. I want to make sure, can you let me know in the comments below once you have these things? So I want you to grab a pen and a notebook, or a pencil and a notebook, or if you're like me, I have like a bunch of different color Sharpie pens, whatever floats your boat. And as we're going to be diving into some real and also some deep concepts, which can be heavy at times, but when you are brought through a process, it doesn't have to be. So there will be both physical and emotional prompts, and I forgot to put on here, but a little secret thing and towards the end of some prompts for you as well. So if you are ready, you have your notebook and pen, and you are ready to get going, please let me know. And I see some comments. Good to go. Okay. Awesome. Perfect. Cool. Thank you, everyone. And again, some of this will be things that you write and some of these things that I will have you do in the chat. So first off is stage 1, which is the tangible/physical. And what I mean by tangible versus just physical is there's some things that aren't easily seen. You might have heard the term invisible disabilities, which I no longer identify with in terms of my own identity, but for so long, that was my identity. So what we're going to be covering in this stage is an assessment along with a body scan, rating the health, and really bringing awareness to what is actually there and what else needs attention, along with bodily image and shifting beliefs. And so we're going to dive right in with the next version of my story of stage 1. So as I had hinted in the story previously, I took everything that I had been diagnosed with, or the mystery illnesses, if you will, and treated them one by one. So I eventually got to the point where I was like, yes, give me all the meds. So I took all the meds to suppress all the problems like a Band-Aid, and I started to manage my body. That was my mindset around my body. Not that it was working for me, not that, different things about my body. I literally was like managing a sick body. And I went through countless doctors' procedures and literally spent thousands trying to find a diagnosis. And I have plenty. Don't get me wrong, I have plenty of diagnoses, but every time it got to a diagnosis, still didn't work. I know I mentioned previously that I was a sports medicine major. And so I was in the same room as people going to school to become doctors and surgeons and physicians. And so it wasn't that I lacked information. And so combining all of this at the same time, I did see some help, which is why stage 1 is still important. So I want to actually dive into some of the physical elements that actually worked. And here we will have an opportunity to actually do an assessment. So first is actually the assessment. So what I'm going to have you guys do, this will kind of be more of an intuitive thing, is I want you to scan your body. So if you're sitting, if you're standing, if it helps you to close your eyes, please do so. But I want you to kind of see what is present for you right now. For example, I was at my oldest brother got married over the weekend. And so I danced my heart out. Greek dancing is one of the most intense workouts I've ever had. So for me, with my body scanning, I'm noticing that my body is very sore, but also is very loud right now. There's a lot of signals happening. So just as you're noticing, notice what seems blank or empty. So right now I'm noticing that there's kind of like silence in my stomach right now. So just take note. Don't have to interpret these yet. Just take note of what is loud and what is silent. Also take note of how you are breathing. Are you breathing through your chest? Breathing through your stomach? Combination of both? Is it shallow or deep? When you do a full scan, if you may be thinking, Karla, why are we doing this? I don't necessarily have all these crazy symptoms, or maybe I have all these crazy symptoms. I'm very acutely aware of what's going on in my body. Awesome. How can you take that deeper? Because this doesn't just have to be injuries. For example, I'm really freaking excited for everyone on this call today and anyone watching the replay. So I'm noticing this nervous fluttery energy in my chest, which interpreting as excitement. Doesn't have to be negative. It could also be really good things. I feel vibrating with energy at the same time. Now, if it helps you to do this on your piece of paper, do that as well. But I want you to rate those health areas. So what I mean by that is, okay, like I just mentioned, my stomach is kind of silent, if you will. Okay, what would I rate that? Okay, that fluttering in my chest, like it's a 10 out of 10 in terms of how amazing it feels. Versus my stomach, there's something going on with that. That's probably more like a 4. Not a 1. It's not like loud like my knees, but it's like a 4. So yeah, 10 being absolutely amazing. 1 being, yeah, no, needs some serious help. Is everyone following this? Let me know in the chat if you're following. And if you're ready to move on to the next. Yeah? Cool. So along with this, especially if you deal with a lot of health issues, is this concept of the sirens. When something is going on in your body or in your mind or in your head that is extremely loud, your body, in order to survive, shuts all communication down everywhere else. So what I want you to actually practice, which is going to sound a little weird, is actually practice of what else needs attention. Okay, I have acknowledged what needs attention already. We're going to address that in a minute. I've acknowledged all of that. Now, what else is there for me? What else have I noticed or not noticed? What have I been ignoring? For example, I'm noticing that I have a slight headache. I did not drink enough water at all this entire weekend. So I'm going to drink a little bit of water. Are you feeling low? Is your body really tired? Doesn't have to be, that's why I say tangible, something like, do you feel weighted? Doesn't have to necessarily be a physical thing. This assessment isn't just something that you do now. It is something that you want to check, just like how you do in your business, quarterly planning, monthly planning, as you are looking back over the last quarter, month, week. This is something that I do frequently to check in. What are the loud sirens? And also, what are the things that I'm ignoring? Because the other part of all of that is the next thing, is your bodily image. So for me, in my personal story, a lot of times that at first I would say, no, I can't do that because I have an autoimmune. I can't do that because I have a migraine. I can't do that because right now I'm in the middle of a panic attack. Well, when I'm in the middle of a panic attack, I can't actually communicate, but like all of these different things. And then my journey was like, okay, well then what can I say yes to? And so I started saying yes to things despite having symptoms. I'll go dance. Yes, I will feel pain afterwards, but I'm going to do it anyway. For you, which one do you, there are others, but for you in this moment in the chat, just so I know, so I can help support you, which one do you identify with more? Saying no because of things, or saying yes in spite of or despite? So in the chat, I want you to say no. Yeah, totally. Something that I will say, that's a good one, Shannon. Yeah. So something that I will say is all of these scans, everything that I am doing in this workshop today and in forever in the future, no answer is wrong. I'll tell you that right now. Everything that you tell me and say will forever be true for you, with a grain of salt, of course, but nothing is ever wrong. So Shannon's brought up a really good point. It depends on how you feel. So I'm going to do a quick little exercise before I dive into that. So when you look in the mirror, what do you say in your head? So if you have the opportunity to actually be in front of a mirror or like grab your phone in your picture, I want you to actually look. I'm going to pull it up for myself right now. I'm going to look at myself in the mirror. Well, I don't have a mirror. I forgot to bring one in. So I'm going to do my phone. When you look at yourself and notice, what do you notice? What do you say in your head? As you start to look at yourself, your eyes, your body, for me, it's like, wow, my hair is interesting today. What does your body start to do? How does it change just by you looking at yourself? What happens? That I want you to actually journal, write in. What does or does not happen when you just look at yourself? And if you don't feel comfortable about doing this exercise right now, then put a little note. I want you to do this exercise later. Of when you look in the mirror, what do you say in your head? If you're live in the group right now or watching the replay, I want you to also put that in the chat and we can support you as well. So I want you to let me know once you're ready of, okay, I will do this later, or okay, I have it. Let me know in the chat. And then obviously if it's in live stream, Avery can let me know in the chat as well. I look tired. Yeah. So noticing what came up. When you said, for example, Shannon, when you said the words, I look tired, or when you noticed that, did you notice in your body the shift that happened when that's what you noticed? For example, for me, I immediately noticed of like, ooh, I have a little bit of like bags under my eyes from celebrating and all of the things. And then I immediately started feeling more tired and more just down. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, what's happening? Right? Yeah, felt more tired. Absolutely. So a little asterisk to this exercise is I want you to give yourself room for what's actually there. So like actually notice those things. And then I want you to purposefully start breathing through your stomach, which is also known as the parasympathetic breathing. And then I want you to look at yourself in the eyes. And what can you thank your body for today? What can you thank your body for today? For me, holy moly, my body did so much for me this weekend. It was a freaking boss. My body was a boss this weekend. You might be saying like, well, how does that change? We'll get in that in a minute. I want you to literally tell yourself something. Don't make it up. I'm not about the false affirmations or anything like that. What can you tell yourself? For example, for me, my body, like I danced and I had fun. And now my body gets to rest. And at the same time, my body gets to feel great because I moved, which for those of you who have a lot of chronic pain, understand what I mean. But in general, it's not just chronic pain, because when I was in severe bouts of depression, my body gets to move and feel good. It was very real. I don't know if you were like me with having depression where you had that phantom pain. This happened way before my car accident, where I was very equipped, well aware of pain because of my depression. All right, so going back into the language and the bodily image, one thing that I noticed for myself is these two options, there's a progression, right? And it definitely depends on how you're feeling, right? How your body is. Yes, but it also is how your brain is. Because the difference between me now recovering from having a fun time versus before, well, I mean, in 2015, I never imagined I would ever dance a day in my life again. So that's a whole other story. But as I recovered, I realized that saying yes to something despite having symptoms was still a war against my body. So let me reread these statements for what they're saying. I'm in a war with my body and I'm going to win. The second one is, I'm in a war with my body and my body won. Think about it. That's literally what you're telling yourself every single time you make a decision or don't make a decision. I'm in a war. So that's what I mean by bodily image. I don't mean, oh, look at yourself and, oh, I look so great today. Which, I mean, do that, girl. I mean, you look fantastic. I mean, I technically, for most of you, I see pictures, but I know a lot of you, and you do look fantastic. But know that with this, we need inherently, in order for the physical stage to shift, you must change your language around the physical. Because it's not just what you are saying, it's what you're not saying as well. So you know the saying, everything works for me and not against me? Or everything works for me, not to me? I'm sure a lot of you have heard that phrase. It used to piss me off to no end. So I was like, wow, yeah, whatever. You haven't been through the life of severe chronic pain when I'm literally in the bed screaming and Cam squeezing my head because that's all I could do. You don't get it. Totally. The shift was, I mean, I was screaming in battle with myself and then wondering why I wasn't winning or why my body wasn't winning. So part of it is that joining back together and seeing your body for what it's actually saying. You might have heard this before. So let me know if this is new information or not. Your physical symptoms, your body, the tangible and physical things are the last warning bells and the last warning signs to what's actually happening inside. Just to double check, is that new information? Is everyone aware of that? It's like literally like the red siren notices, the final notice. If it's new, totally fine. I can go into it a little bit. Oh, sorry. In the chat, let me know. I always forget to say that. Shannon's saying not new, and that means new. It says the same new. Okay. Cool. Awesome. I'm going to dig more into it in stage 2. Just want to double check before I even went in there. So to recap, stage 1, and I know there's like, what's going on? Don't worry, that's coming up. So first, with this tangible and physical is literally, are you actually aware of what's going on in your body right now? Truly. So that's the body scan and the assessment. Then there's the body awareness of what are you actually bringing into awareness. So when I talk about looking in the mirror, what do you actually, like, what do you see? How do you respond? And then what if you change something different, and how do you respond then? Then we went around bodily image, which is very closely tied. But especially the language around the physical, which I'm going to dive more into that in the next stage. Everyone good? Is my talking too fast? Is everyone getting this? I don't want to go too fast. And then I don't worry, I'll also bring it all together into one big circle. Is everyone getting this? Let me know in the chat. Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay, cool. Yay. Okay. So stage 2 is emotional, and it also is part of trauma. And I don't just mean emotional trauma, which is why there's a slash there. There's also physical trauma. There's also mental. There's different stages of trauma. So for me tackling this stage started with therapy and digging into really my own abuse growing up. Haven't really shared this publicly in a way, so you'll be getting the realness today. I was sexually abused for the majority of my childhood. I grew up with 2 parents that had a very tumultuous relationship, and a family of 8. It was towards the end. I was the 5th child of 6 children. And so through all of that was very much, couldn't help it, very much felt ignored. Again, my story. So there was that amongst other things that I definitely needed to go to have definitely some trauma healing and some emotional healing, as I definitely had a lot of abandonment wounds that I felt, a lot of abuse, not just sexual, but also verbal. And so I stepped into therapy to start to help those things. And then I started to notice a few things. Started to notice that a lot of my physical symptoms started improving. The insomnia that I had actually got worse for a while, which I know is, the more I dive into this, the more it got worse. Interesting. I noticed that as I addressed certain things, my anxiety started to get worse, but then it started to get better. Because one of those big things is I started identifying where I was getting triggered in my body. And I will pull the 2 pieces together in a minute. But also through the sexual abuse in my childhood, something that I never felt I had was control. So that led me down the path of anorexia. And I had an eating disorder for a long time. And for those of you that may not know, anorexia can be presented in a few different ways, but it is an eating disorder where you severely restrict yourself. For me, it was a combination of severely restricting my eating and then working out to the extreme. So it was a combination for me technically. And that was my form of control. Because again, my body at this point, I was throwing up after eating because I felt so sick, different things like that. So I felt like I could control, because I felt better if I didn't eat. So therefore I didn't eat. So as I was going through therapy, I started noticing that some of those things started to let up. And as I was diving into that, at least I realized that I'm on the wrong slide. This is my story of stage 2. As I started digging into that, I was like, okay, this is clearly it. Some of my symptoms are getting better. It's not just the physical. Let me just dive fully in to this dark mess. So I went through 11 years of talk therapy. I did EMDR, which for those that don't know, it's eye movement deconstruction reconstruction therapy, and various others, recreational therapy, went to school for psychology and recreational therapy. And I was working towards becoming a licensed marriage and family therapist, along with recreational therapy and other therapeutic modalities. So as you can imagine, I dove in deep. Therapy from professionals, and then also diving in to schooling. It was there that I became absolutely obsessed with the biological psychology. So cognitive psychology, so literally your brain and how your brain works, and neuroscience, literally the communication in your brain, and different things of like how our subconscious mind and our conscious mind were connected and what happens with trauma. And so for me, I became obsessed. I'm like, this is the answer. This is all that I needed. I could see the clear pattern. I realized that for me, there was a clear line between the psychological and the physical. For me, with my insomnia from being sexually abused as a kid, I realized that part of my insomnia, when is the most vulnerable time for a child? Nighttime, right before they go to bed. So for me, a form of control was to stay awake and not fall asleep until I was like completely convinced that no one was out to get me. I would sleepwalk even when I slept, which meant I didn't really sleep. So from a very early age started that problem, that pattern, I should say, which then obviously manifested into physical things like insomnia so bad I was literally hallucinating. At age 14, my insomnia was so bad I hallucinated. My mind was playing tricks on me because I had such little sleep, which eventually led to a lot of other chemical imbalances because literally you heal in your sleep, but I wasn't sleeping. So I started to notice that there was this trend, and I was like, well, what do I do with other things like my car accident? Very, very real cause, right? You might be thinking, Karla, I have all this pain from a very physical, tangible event. I get it. My chronic pain part of it has a very physical cause. In the car accident where I should have died, they charted the path of our car. If our car hadn't have turned just slightly, if it hadn't have jetted out, we would not be here today. Not being dramatic, literally the reality. So my pain had a very clear cause. And I get that for a lot of people, it's that for you too. The thing about it is that car accident in that pattern actually amplified the patterns of my past. Because like I said, I had pain when I had depression. I had pain with anxiety. Pain was not foreign to me, right? I was always known as the sick kid. So a lot of times we will look at what is happening tangibly and point it to our door and say that is what's causing our pain without understanding the entire process. And that's why stage 2, me diving in, didn't fix everything. I was constantly trying to find meaning. We all actually are trying to find meaning in everything. For example, it's why people walk up to me and ask what's the meaning behind my tattoo, especially since I have a tattoo and words. For example, people are trying to find meaning in everything. You see, if you're stuck in traffic on a time of day that it's not normal, what's the first thing you think of? I wonder if it's construction or a car accident. Always trying to find meaning in everything we do, and that's normal. Literally how we are built. We are built to create patterns. So these very clear physical things that happened to me amplified what was already happening in my life. I realize some of you might not know this analogy, so I'm going to go into it. So what do I mean when I say we hastily point to our doors to explain everything? I'm going to share a story with you that immediately starts like, I feel like I should cackle. It's such a ridiculous story. So Cam's cracking up over there too. So we are selling our house and we needed to be out of the house for inspections. So I went to my sister's house. And she knew about it, but she wasn't home. And so I had a key and everything. And so I unlocked the door and I opened the door and I hear a beep of their alarm. I'm like, wait, that's strange. But I was like, whatever. She knew I was here. Like, we're good. So we close the door and then we hear the alarm countdown. And I'm like, oh crap. Like, what do we do? We're like, I remember looking at Cam and it was like a moment of just like frozen, like, what the fuck? Like, what do we do? I run over and I check how much time I have. I text my sister. I call everyone I could think of that might know this freaking code for the alarm. And in the moment of pure panic, did not think, Karla, get out of the house. And here comes the blaring alarm, which their particular alarm is meant to disable you in a minute. If you listen to this alarm for more than a minute to 2, your ears will stay ringing for up to 3 hours or more. It is meant to completely debilitate you. So we stumble into the backyard. Eventually, we figure it out, put in the code, and let me tell you, did I have a migraine? So many things happened afterwards. So in this example, I'm going to have you guys do a little exercise as well. The opening the door, think of that as your event. So the car accident was my event. That was opening the door. The beep of the alarm is your psychological response. So for me, when we were in our car accident, apparently my psychological response when we were in a car accident was scream because I thought Cam had left. His chair had broken and I thought he had flown out the window. I have zero recollection of my mind telling me that my husband had died. Zero recollection, completely concussed. So the beep of the alarm is your psychological response. Then the alarm counting down is your emotions. What happens after the event, after you actually have had time to actually acknowledge what the heck is happening, and all emotions come up. Think about as the alarm countdown. And then think of your physical symptoms as the blaring alarm. Like I said, those warning bells. For some people, that was new information. But this concept is that blaring alarm is your physical symptoms. So this is like literally like what is going on in your body. So, like I said, my door, I pointed to the car accident for why I was in pain, completely ignoring the fact that I was in pain before that. It just wasn't necessarily tangible. Same thing with my insomnia. I pointed to, I just stay up late and get up early and all this stuff. I have insomnia because it's really stressful at home. I blamed my environment. Also can be said about my sexual abuse. I was sexually abused. This all happened, and this is why. But even before the sexual abuse, there's a pattern already there. So I want you guys to dive in. And I want you to do this for yourself. So what is your door? I know for some of you might be like, Karla, there's like a million doors. Cool. I gave 2. Choose one. If there's one you really don't want to do that one. Trust me, that is the one. If there's one that you're like, nope, don't want to do it, kind of close tight. That one for me was the sexual abuse. Coming out and actually telling people, oh, hell no. I didn't want to tell that. So that's when I knew I would need to dive in, and I'll dive in more throughout this time what all happened. So Just a reminder, the events of our life that we may have forgotten about, or things that you don't think is a big deal anymore, things that you're like, no, anything that you're feeling like, no, do that one. And as you write out this example, so the event, the psychological response, the emotion, and the physical symptoms, I want you to write out, you can just bullet point, doesn't have to be anything fancy. And as you're writing that out, I want you to, again, bring in stage one, bring in that body awareness. What's happening in your body? Love you, Abby. See you soon. Abby has to run and she'll catch the replay. So notice what's happening in your body. And I want you I forgot to write this in this example, but I want you to note what happens in your body when you start writing out what your door is. What your door analogy is, because that is where the pattern is. Already the pattern comes up immediately whenever we tap into that space. For me, when I think of my sexual abuse, the pattern that comes up for me is like, oh my gosh, like, what are people going to think? I immediately start feeling shame in my hips. Well, I pressure in my hips. Eventually have identified it as shame. As I have done the work to kind of go through and recognize what's happening in my body and distill the pattern down to what is truly coming up for me. And from that, I'm able to address that, which I'm getting ahead of myself. That's coming in a little bit. So for you, your door example, what is the event? Psychological response, the emotion or emotions, and then the physical symptoms. And if you're having a hard time with connecting all of these, that's all right. This is a newer concept, I understand. You'll also have the replay. So through all of this will be so important. And then finally, notice what's happening in your body. So when you kind of have that in your mind, I want you to throw it up in the chat. You don't have to do the whole thing. Just throw up in the chat if you're ready, or if you need a little bit more time, you can totally do that. Or if you need support or examples, I can give examples of each of the sections too, if that would be helpful for you. And later on, after this, you can do that for everything, all the different events. So for example, I already gave the example of the car accident and my own personal sexual abuse. I also have medical trauma. When I say mystery illness, I was literally told by a doctor, well, you're a mystery. Not just any doctor, he was a specialist. He was supposed to be a specialist in the field that I was having a problem in. So I definitely have other events. Because the thing is, this can feel pretty heavy. Not gonna lie, definitely can feel very heavy. And the thing about this is, as what is actually heavy is all of the stuff that comes up around these events, not the event itself. Because the event itself is completely independent from who you are. The heaviness comes from essentially your ego, not like your pride, but like ego as in like the verbally you coming in and establishing an identity within the event. Using my kind of silly but very real example of the alarm going off, part of the identity, I got all messed up in the head because I was like, oh my gosh, the cops are going to get called. And then like my sister, out of the goodness of her heart, like invited me over, and now I'm screwing things up for her. It's her da 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 da. Started immediately having a huge racket in my head because my identity started to immediately get its claws into the event itself. It was totally fine. I had a nap, turn off the alarm, it was fine. That's what I mean by the heaviness and the weight is actually the part that is attaching to your identity that is ready to let go, to be released. So I'm not going to pretend that some of this stuff isn't heavy. It totally is, until it isn't. All right. Want to check back in. Is everyone good to go for the wrap for this, or do you need a little bit more time? And again, obviously can fill it out more later. Yeah? Woo-hoo. Okay, cool. So just to recap, for stage 2 is the connection between the psychological patterns that create physical symptoms. And Nas, thank you for sharing. Stomach, take note of that for later in this. You probably already have, but we'll dive in that. So for stage 2, as you've already noticed, is how a lot of times we see our physical symptoms as the event, or the things that happen to us as the event, and then kind of work our way backwards. But really, it's actually the psychological patterns that eventually create physical symptoms. We obviously went over what we just discussed, which is our door, the events in our life that can seem like not a great deal, or we could have forgotten about. Obviously, we don't have a lot of time to go into the ones that we may have forgotten about. And a lot of things that really have the tendency to control our lives. I shared my own story of how I identified that my pain had a very clear physical cause, and how we're always trying to find meaning in everything. And so for me, I did both. I did stage 1 with the tangible and the physical, and then I did stage 2 with the emotional trauma. I did all this stuff, all the mindset stuff, all the performance, everything. I'm good, right? I'm healed, feeling better than ever. And then 2019 happened. This is another picture of me in 2019 in a hospital bed. I had this really weird stomach pain that didn't seem normal than everything else. And it led to them freaking out and wondering if I needed to be prepped for surgery. There's the whole thing. And for us women, and men too, but especially for women, we hold a lot of our stress and fear in our stomachs. And so as I was in the hospital and they couldn't figure out what was wrong, and they were super worried I wasn't allowed to eat anything in case I needed to have surgery, I thought about that. Fast forward, I was hospitalized, I think, or not hospitalized, at that point, I was at the ER 2 other times, and then 3 more times in 2020. So I was literally thinking, like, what the heck, man? I've done all the physical things. I've done all the emotional, like, work through my trauma. I don't cry. There's stuff that happens. Like, yeah, I might get a little emotional as I connect back to that point, but it doesn't actually affect me. What's happening? Was being diagnosed with more and more things. It just seemed like it was getting worse. And so I found myself in a situation where I absolutely freaking hated my life. It's like, Ines, I hear you. Oh, just realized that you mentioned feeling your stomach. It's connected to fear. and stress. But there's something deeper. We'll go into that later. For me, so I get it. I hated everything. I was stuck in that bubble of feeling so hopeless because I could see my potential, but I viewed my ailments as the enemy. We talked about bodily image. It's like I had gone through all of it, and yet I still couldn't feel free. I still didn't feel free. It got so bad that at a mastermind, I literally blurted out, I hate myself. Really came to a head. And I was so shocked because when I said it, I absolutely meant it. Like this. And then I realized like that much hate is poisoning my body. So that led me to not only incorporating stage 1 and 2, but also 3. So like I said, when I was sexually abused as a child, I didn't feel safe. The most vulnerable time in my life was right before going to bed. Fast forward, I had chronic insomnia, depression, panic attacks that transferred into school, feeling like I always had to be the one, up until what I just shared, and to this point where I finally put those pieces together and unlock something within myself that every single one of you also have the ability to do. So I basically, at this point, I recognized that I needed to completely shift the way I looked and addressed my physical body beyond what I have already talked about. Completely shift the way I had viewed and associated healing from that psychological standpoint. I know in stage 2, I talked about the psychological patterns. And ultimately, how do I liberate myself from those stories that were circling my identity like a roaring lion seeking who it may devour? Like literally. And what ultimately shifted for me was that I allowed myself to have the life, like what ultimately shifted when I did those things around my story and my identity, is that I could actually have the life and business that I love while also ultimately actually fully healing numerous symptoms and feeling my best in years. Like I said, I went dancing and then I had family stuff the next day, like out all night. Never thought in a million years. And the fact that I am here with you today, and all I'm just blown away and so freaking grateful. So part of that is the 7 eyes. I'm gonna dive into some of it right now. So the first part, 1, physical is not independent, which we already showed. The emotional and trauma is not independent. But your entire psyche, including your identity, is so freaking key. So when I say your circle identity, I wanted to speak to you face to face for this one. I want you to think of a literal circle. Each one of us is born, and you can write this in your notebook if you'd like. Each one of us is born with their identity, their makeup, everything as a circle. And as we go through life, as obviously we do, different experiences, different things in our life starts coming and attaching themselves into the circle. Different things of, oh, I'm really good at science, or oh, I'm not good at math, to I want to be a dancer, or oh, I can't be in that dad says I'm not a boy, I can't do that. Lots of I can'ts, all of experiences. For me personally, a lot of abuse in my life also started to formulate extra layers to that circle. Fast forward to adulthood. For you as well, that becomes cemented. Think of it as rigid. It is no longer a moving circle. It is like, think of cement around it. So part of your circle identity is understanding and walking through the path of softening those edges and that rigidity, basically. I can't say that word very well. So that all of those things that are attached, the things that you want to stay, stays, and the things that you don't want are softened, and sometimes it's a leech that literally needs to be pulled away. I think I mentioned that before, of there are some things that we hold on to ourselves that are never meant to be there. For me in medical trauma, like Ines, I feel ya. When I was told that I'm potentially infertile, oh my gosh, that identity of me being a woman, there's so much that I placed onto my life, and so much that I didn't even, because I had put that into my identity, I didn't even freaking open myself up to the possibility that anything else could be different. Ignoring the fact that my best friend, like I have literally people in my life who've also been diagnosed with endo that have had babies. I've also had people that aren't diagnosed with endo that were diagnosed completely infertile, and they had to do IVF treatments and different things like that. And all of a sudden they found out they were pregnant after. Different things where diagnoses and different things like that get placed into your identity, on that circle of your identity, to the point where it creates that event that is an event in of itself. And so for me, that created an identity and a rigidity where even if things could happen, I couldn't move. Because part of it is, do you allow healing? There's this concept that really baffled me for so long. I grew up in a religious background, and there's a story of how Jesus was at this pool. I'm going to totally paraphrase because I can't remember the story fully, but you'll get the idea. And this guy has been at the pool waiting to be healed. And Jesus comes up to him and asks, do you want to be healed? And the guy's like, kidding me? Like, I've been here for years. I think it was like 20 years. Of course I want to be healed. And I always remember thinking that was the weirdest freaking question ever. Like, what? Do I want to be healed? Like, obviously, do I want to be a mom? Yes. Like, what kind of question is that? And I would get so angry. So angry. Simple. Right? Until I realized that had become so much of my identity that I had literally closed myself off to allow any type of healing to take place, because it had to happen in the way that my rigid circle would allow. Part of the healing that has happened is I am a bonus mama to a lot of amazing kids. Including supporting and helping foster families, being able to, oh my gosh, the moment where this one little girl said my name for the first time. She was 7. She started talking. Different things like that, of realizing I am a mom. I'm a mom in the sense of a nurturing mother to a lot of amazing kids. And let's be real, a lot of adults too, not gonna lie. We can all be a kid sometimes. A nurturing mother. And at the same time, allowing healing and not being closed off to if that happens in my literal womb, or being open to, does that mean once we move, becoming a foster mom officially in Tennessee once we've moved? Again, being open, but I couldn't be open to anything because I was like, no, I need to have a child, literally physically in my womb, which not going to say that can't happen, because anything can happen. But that's what I mean by that had become my identity of I can't be a mom because I am labeled, my body isn't able to support a baby. And then I was like, no, I'm not going to allow that language, speaking of language we use around our body, like, no, right now, my season of motherhood is nurturing and helping support others. I had to completely redefine what even mother means, what motherhood means, what nurturing, what divine feminine power means. Going deeper into the language. So circle identity comes as cement. And so that is the first part of everything that is the foundational piece. Go into the next part. So that's the foundational piece, is I call it your circle identity. So if you have this in your notebook, write your circle. In the middle, that's divine you. Don't put your name. It's the divine you. It's who you were born to be. So for example, me, my divine me is not Karla who was sexually abused. It was not Karla who was in a car accident. It is not Karla who potentially is infernal. That is not my divine you. My circle identity, my divine me is different. Outside on that edge is Karla, my identity. On the outside edge is all of your experiences. So what are the things that you have in your circle that belong on the outside? What are on the outer edge of that circle, or do belong there that's not there? But before we can even kind of walk through that, there is another piece that I want to walk through today. And that's story versus truth. I know here in the literally the story economy group here, we've obviously talked about story in the business context, in the marketing context, who you are in the business, what's your why and your authority and positioning. I'm going to take it a little step further, because a lot of us are operating from stories rather than basing our stories from truth. I hinted at this at the beginning of towards the beginning of the workshop, that we are always finding meaning in everything, just like people want to know the meaning in their tattoos or why there's traffic. Or your story is a thing you've believed about yourselves, whether it is conscious or subconscious. This is where the whole nature versus nurture conversation comes up. Because our belief systems, our identity that we've placed upon ourselves, not the divine you identity, but our identity that we grow into, is formed by the core belief systems that we've created as a child. Which means it's influenced by our parents, influenced by other authorities, siblings, if you have them, different people around. It is the external, and then it is followed by the internal, which formulates those core patterns and belief systems that bring forth those events. Think that. Let me repeat that. Those core belief systems and patterns that we believed and added to our circle created patterns that eventually translated into physical symptoms. There is now an entire department, like an entire section of science called epigenetics, where they've literally done studies that identical twins aren't actually identical, because based on how each one responds to different stimuli, their genes will present in a different way, literally based on how that individual responds to it. So I want to challenge you today. Your story is not the same as the truth. Give you an example that was a little hard for me to swallow for a while. I had told myself that the reason why I couldn't have the life and business and partnership with my husband that I wanted is because, one, my body was tarnished from sexual abuse. Two, I was too sick to get anything that I ever wanted. And three, I've been abandoned all my life, so I can't rely on anyone else. So I must do it on my own, but I can't do it on my own because of number two, number three, number two, and number four. Did I tell myself that? Absolutely not. Because people would have looked at me and been like, you crazy? It's what I believed based on core belief systems. The truth? Yeah, I mean, definitely have health issues that I resisted healing. That was part of the truth. And to be honest, I still get it wrong sometimes. I still think, oh, this is my truth, and then uncover another layer and it's like, oop. But that is the beauty of it, is the more you explore and dive into truth, the more you heal the story within. The more that you start to identify the divine you within your identity and start to soften that, the more you heal the story within. And guess what happens? Well, I mean, I'm one of the case studies, if you will, today. What happens? Ultimately, those were the pieces combined with stage 1 and stage 2 that healed me. And I still have plenty to do. I mean, I'm still living life, right? Living life to its fullest, which means so much is happening. But that's part of the journey of healing the story within, because one of those things is, which is why I told that story about, like, are you willing to be healed? Because for me, I was like, what the heck? Of course I'm willing to be healed. While also saying that I couldn't get what I wanted because of my body. But my body was the thing that needed to heal. But I was like constantly fighting my body. Being willing to be healed, you have, each of us deep inside have that ability to liberate ourselves in one form or another. To recap stage 3, circle identity work. It's a story versus truth. It's ultimately the biggest concept is heal the story within. Now, I could try to give you all the info of like, okay, cool, how do we do all of these things? And go into this more. But I know it actually will do more harm than good, because let's be honest, some of this is pretty heavy. Some of this, even for me, there are still stories that I still find myself shying away from because I've made it mean something. I have trauma in my past that I have still held on to, which is literally poisoning my body. I literally have blood work where they're like, you have inflammation in your blood and we don't know why. It seems like it just appears. Literally holding on to trauma, not willing to let it go. It's literally producing inflammation in my blood. The way you respond to things, epigenetics has shown that it literally changes the way that your genes present themselves. So this is exactly why real support is needed to hold that balance between stretching and acclimating, I mean. Because part of that is healing, like allowing that healing emotionally, while also the not ignoring the very physical things, because there are still things that I do to this day to support myself. When I'm going through a lot of emotional things, having alcohol is not a good idea because it's a poison, causes inflammation. When I'm going through a lot of difficult things, there are still physical things that I do to support my body. There are still physical things that I put other people through to support their bodies. And it's not always a battle. I don't mean that, because there are some things. I don't have a chronic insomnia anymore. I can't even believe I'm freaking saying that. That was my identity for so long. I couldn't watch horror movies because my hallucinations were pretty freaking real. Like I felt like I was living in a horror movie. So I couldn't watch horror movies for so long because it was an instant trigger. So now saying that, I get emotional. I'm going to hug myself, and I am hugging myself, my teenagers years, that child that didn't understand what was happening. I got taken to a psychiatrist because no one could understand why this little girl seemed so messed up. So full recap with some more. Addressing just the tangible and the physical side. The word just is the problem there. Because there's still very much things that you need to do to support your body. Your body's doing some badass work. Addressing just the emotional and the trauma in of itself, again, is the same thing. Talked a little bit about how it needs to address the full picture and heal the story from within. I know I've talked about a lot of heavy stuff. Getting to my favorite part of what life is like now. Look at my handsome man. I have a relationship with my husband that I never thought I would have. It actually scares me in a good way. On the physical side, my pain attacks are way less frequent and way less intense. And now I'm way more in tune with my body. That one, I know when it's coming and I know why and where it's coming from, and usually can connect it to a lot of things. So I move through it quicker, which is why I say less frequent. And I'm more in tune with my body that I was able to completely get off of weed and medications, narcotic medications. I know I mentioned this, I smoked weed a lot for pain. On the emotional side, I've healed so many emotional wounds that my body literally feels lighter and I'm happier. Something that you'll be hearing from me here. Some of you may know this, some of you may not. I didn't really like to talk about this part, but I don't experience devastating anxiety anymore. I would have panic attacks so intense that I would literally be on the floor gasping, telling myself, I am talking, therefore I can breathe. I am talking, therefore I can breathe. And I would say it like a broken record. felt like so many things with that. And don't get me wrong, I still live life, which means I still have anxiety, but it's different because I'm able to move through and process that emotional turbulence in minutes rather than weeks, days, weeks, months. Because I understand that when I have anxiety now, one, or overwhelm, it means I'm not actually addressing those emotions. And I understand that my body is a badass nurturing mother. And the biggest priority for your body is to nurture yourself. So when you have anxiety, it's your body nurturing you, being like, yo, hello. This little piece that you've been like starving, let's take care of that. And I have not just a beautiful partnership and collaboration with Cam, I also have a business myself as well. And we're stepping into creating transformational events by the beginning of next year, or like end of January. Something that I've always dreamed to do since I was a little girl, like literally. So that's a little bit brief snapshot for me. So what's next? So for me, I like describe myself as was very driven. I pushed through everything. I needed support just to sleep. And even then it was like still hallucinating. My freaking trauma was manifesting as physical symptoms. And it was causing more damage because I wasn't even giving my body a chance to process and heal. That's what I mean by like allowing healing. Trust me, I ignored this work for a long time because I've known this is needed to happen for a long time. And even today with this workshop, I've known that this workshop needed to happen. I'm going to dust this. This has been a long time coming. Because like, I know, you know how devastating it can be to your impact, what you want to create, everything to your, not just your business, because I care about your business, but I ultimately care about you and your life. And so for me to be able to be comfortable in my own self-expression, to be honest with not just myself, but others, is a freedom unlike anything else. And I might get a little emotional about this part too, but to see my clients be able to do that, my nurturing mother, me, my divine me. One of my clients is actually developing a real relationship with herself and her emotions, seeing herself for the first time in literally decades. Proud mama over here. And like I just said, like we just signed up to get certified in facilitating and running breakthrough transformational events. And that was my 10-year vision. In 2019, that was my 10-year vision, and it's now 10 months to fully be running one-day, weekend, and week-long retreats. Even 2 years ago, I would have said that was impossible because literally in June 2019, which was a few months after that big hospital visit, like that's when we had created it. And we were like, oh yeah, in 10 years, because maybe I'll be able to handle standing for longer than 10 minutes. Sorry, I got a little emotional there. This is how important this is and how much joy my business and my life brings me now. So basically what's next, got off on a little tangent there. You have two choices, really, because we all have choices. You get to allow healing. If you haven't heard this info and continue with what hasn't been working, you can do that. or you can implement these principles and this will bring this newfound awareness, change that language, all those things. This replay will be up available if you want to review it. You can do that. And if it makes sense for you, you can also apply to work with me. Though I firmly will say this a million times over, no matter what happens, I will still have a quick call with you to determine what your next steps are. It doesn't have to be to work with me. Because like I said, ultimately for me, nurturing mom, being able to put this information out in the world, because healing people help heal people, is my ultimate work. So this is the work that you want to dive into and have that support. Then I'm going to open that invitation up. I'm going to put into the chat in the Facebook group and also in the chat within the Zoom live as well to basically apply to work with me. Part of it is questions to help you bring awareness to your body. I formulated the application process to not just be an application, but to actually be a journey for yourself, to really help connect you and be able to do some of this work to help your own healing and help liberate you as well. So jump on the application, even if you don't think, thank you, Avery. Link to apply is in the chat. And what that's gonna look like, I'm gonna hop over here. It's gonna start like this, little application process. The normal stuff, and then it's going to kind of go into a little bit about your life for yourself, why it matters, some of your biggest challenges. And this, I want you to dive deep because this is for you. What have you done? Like I said, what is your health? This workshop that we just did, what have you found? What is being affected? Like, what do you actually want? A little shorter, but this will ultimately help. This will ultimately help me to, even if it doesn't work for us to work together in terms of like us one-on-one, that will still help me to better prepare so that we can figure out next steps. So with that being said, that is available to you at any time. And just realized we're a little bit over, but I have some time. So I was not watching the clock at all. So I do apologize. We can dive into some Q&A. So I know Cam needs to head out. And that's totally fine. So Avery, if you see any questions that I missed, just let me know. But I'm going to okay, cool. I'm going to dive into Q&A if there's any. Oh, I might as well stop my share. There we go. Oh, I love you, Ness. If you have any questions, I know some people have to hop off because I know I totally went over time. Still put them in the replay. So at this point, like, tag me in the replay and I'll still answer your questions. I will probably do a live afterwards. Like after I see a bunch of questions and answer them for sure. And so anyone watching now or on the replay, you can just hashtag replay, let me know what your questions are and I would be happy to answer them. And also like chat too. So yeah, through that link to apply, kind of what to expect is obviously you already saw a little bit of that application process, and we would hop on a connection call and through that explore what's really going on for you, what's coming up, what stage you are in the process, so stage 1, 2, 3, and go through what kind of those next steps are. And if I with 100% confidence can say, yes, like I can actually help you, then I will invite you in and we can have that type of conversation. And even if that is not the path for you at this moment, we can still have a call and see where your path will lead and see if there's anything I can do to help you. As like I said, I have a lot of different experiences, and that's part of my work is to help others heal themselves. So thank you all so much. Thank you. I love you all. If there's no one, if I missed any questions, just re-tag me and I'll answer them later. And for now, appreciate I appreciate you all so much. Thank you for those that joined me live. Thank you for those that are watching the replay. And I will be doing much more in the future to be able to help you help yourself in your own healing process, as part of my mission is to help others liberate themselves. So I love you all, and I will talk to you guys soon.